Matrix, William Miranda.
Dennis Stone has spent 55 years exploring American Stonehenge, the ancient 4,000-year-old site he grew up in Salem, New Hampshire. When he's not flying as a full-time airline captain, he's on the hilltop researching the stone chambers, alignments, mysteries that have drawn experts for decades. Dennis has appeared on TV and radio since the 1970s. His family include his wife, Pat, and son Kelsey, which helps run this research site, American Stonehenge. It remains a fascinating archeological puzzle with its man-made stone structures and solar and lunar alignments, raising big questions about who built it. Some evidence even suggests ancient Celtic influence, hinting that the European visitors may have reached North America thousands of years before Columbus. And I'd like to welcome to the Paradigm Matrix, Mr. Dennis Stone. Dennis, how are you?
Well, William, doing pretty good this evening. Thank you so much for having me on again. It's been a while, and I really appreciate the chance to talk to you and kind of update you on a few things we found.
That's fantastic. Let me tell you, I'm glad to have you on. I know that the last time we were on was on KCOR, a little over maybe 5 years ago. And as a
Wow.
matter of fact, I believe the last show I had was on site.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, you did
Yeah.
and I guess you'll do another
Yeah.
one too in the future. That was so much fun that they, Willie, the site's very kind of hard to describe, but when you're on site doing the show, it's so much easier for the listeners, or the viewers, I should say, to see what the site looks like. But I can't believe it's been almost over 5 years now. It's certainly gone by very quickly.
Yeah. Yeah, it does go by quick. I'm planning, speaking with you, I was planning to bring my drone up, and take some videos and take some photography of some of the areas, especially the S-shaped serpent walls. Okay.
Yeah.
I wonder how they would look, from an aerial shot. And of course, I plan to, of course, bring my recording equipment, and we could be doing the interview as we walk. So
Oh, that'd be wonderful.
it'd be pretty, it'll be pretty interesting, and it'd be different for a change.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I enjoy that kind of thing, and there'll be certainly a lot to talk about. Every step along the way, there's something there to see, So I think it'll be a lot of fun. We'll pick a nice weather day for sure. Today was a little 39 degrees this morning. It was just, and the wind was howling, and we had some trees down, and so we'll try to pick out a nice day to do this. That would be a really nice
Yeah.
thing to do. And the fall's not bad either. Fall or summer. In the fall, no mosquitoes and the foliage is nice. But any day up there, as long as the weather's not terrible, it's a nice day up there.
That's great. As a matter of fact, I wanted to touch base with you on any recent discoveries. I know that I had heard that you have found some more windows
Right.
on the site.
Yeah. Uh, yeah. In the 5 years or a little bit more than when you were here last, I think we probably had a couple dozen back then, and the number today is 36. Just in the last 2 years, we found about
Wow.
4 or 5 more windows, including one shaped like a five-sided, like a pentagram almost, we call it pentagonal shaped window, and that's a really interesting window. But others have been found too. Number today is we have 36 of them. The first one being found 10 years ago in April. So a little over 10 years ago, I found the first window. Didn't know what we really had. I had never heard of windows before in the stone walls. In the chambers, yes. In the main site, there are windows in the chamber walls themselves. But this is in the stone walls. And that was
Yes.
the same time we started finding the serpent walls too that spring. So we had two things happening, serpent walls and windows. And today, the number of serpents, we think we have a total of 16 that I counted. And again, we go back to about 36 windows. So, and who knows, there may be a few more up there, They're kind of hard to find sometimes because they're not always just a open window with a lintel, sill, and side stones that you can see through.
Mhm.
Some of them had cobbles. These are like softball, maybe a little bit bigger stones that were actually set inside of them, and we have 5 of those. And when you put these stones inside the window, it blocks the light coming through, and you can go by it walking. I go by on my ATVs all the time, or snowshoeing in the wintertime. And unless you really look at it closely, you may miss it. You know, and I've been here since 1955, and where some of these windows are, and brush is another thing too. If you have a little bit of brush, even in the wintertime, it can kind of cover it somewhat, even if the leaves are off, and making it hard to see. Um, I mean, some of them are where people have been walking by. One of them near the watch house, and that was open in 1958, and there's a window on the way to the lower well. It's really close to the ground. It's actually a big window, but unless you kind of get down, you don't see the light coming through it. So they can hide very easily. They can blend into the stone wall. Another one we have is has stone shutters that are actually like Venetian blinds that are still in it. And
Oh,
that was
that's
found the day they
interesting.
was filming us for the Ancient Alien in 2019, and the cameraman had been up on the site with his drone doing B-roll for the day, and we knew at
Mhm.
the end of the day he was finishing up. So my assistant archaeologist, he's a full-time stonemason, and he's an archaeologist too, and he was off that day, and we went up together to see if we could help the gentleman finish up a shooting for a Ancient Alien show, and he was wrapping it up, and we escorted him back down towards the visitor center. And as we're walking down by a wall that again we've been walking by since 1955 is the first time I visited it. We opened in '58, and that was the original way up to the site. We have a nature trail that takes people up. It's a different route today, but people can still go up the old way, especially people that may have to get up quickly. It's a shortcut. People that might have a hard time walking, it's flatter. In strollers, it's much easier for
Mhm.
strollers. And that's the way we take our vehicles if we have filming on the site or we have, I go up there with my tractor, the lawnmower, and all of that. Oh, walking right by this, and Pete happened to look over, and he looks down on the wall, and he goes, Dennis, I think you got another window there. And I looked at it. I didn't see it quite at first. And then I could see the sill and the lintel, you know. And then I saw all these little flat stones, just like a Venetian blind stacked up in there. And I went, holy cow. Unfortunately, the film gentleman had put all his equipment away. They're all in the, great big cases and everything's been put away. That would have been kind of a cool
Yes.
find for him, you know. Obviously, it would have been on the spur of the moment, an actual discovery right in front of him. And he saw it too. And I went over, and what I did is I just touched the little Venetian blind stones or flat slabs inside, all stacked on top of each other, and I just wiggled them, and they were all loose. I didn't pull them out. I didn't want to disturb it, but they're all loose inside of it. Another type have actually flat stones that are would actually fit vertically into the window as like a shutter. So we have different
Okay.
types of shutters, and we have cobbles. It makes it kind of hard to see them, unless the light's coming through, you don't really notice them so well, and but there are 36 of them that there.
No, it's amazing. Now, Dennis, you think have you found out if any of these windows that you found have a purpose? Okay,
That's a million
as
dollar
far as
question, and that's a great question, Lee.
alignments are
We don't.
concerned.
Yeah, that's what comes up. Yeah, they align with anything, and we got to do more research on that. Honestly, I would say first off, some of the windows are in some of the serpent walls, but not all. And this is true not only at our site, but afterwards we found out in the Berkshires. Um, One of the gentlemen that was on the History Channel with his own show about the ancient giants, he was a member of my dad's group, NERA. He showed a particular site in the Berkshires of Massachusetts, and he shows serpent walls.
Mhm.
And I saw the pictures. I wasn't there myself, but a friend was, and she went and visited him and all this, and she saw it. And in some of the serpent walls out there, there are windows too, and that is true also in Connecticut, in a big site of North Stonington, Connecticut. And some of the walls where the windows are, they don't look like serpent walls to me. They don't seem to have a head, a body, and a tail per se. They look like kind of like a stone wall, although none of our stone walls look like farmers' walls. They have big slabs of stone, they twist, they turn, they bend, they do all these unusual patterns, unlike farmers' walls, which are fairly straight. But as far as aligned with like solstices, equinoxes, star alignments, that really we haven't seen any correlation there yet. But I think that should be studied further because
I
what
wonder
was
if you
their
would. I wonder if you would find something. You
yeah,
know, I
I don't
wonder
yeah.
if you would find something.
Well, that's been brought up too, and so far we haven't, other than photographing and then recording them and kind of looking at them kind of carefully, we haven't gone much further than that. But some of them are actually, let's say, facing east. What they're facing different directions too. You know, they don't all face the same direction. So if you're looking through, you're not necessarily looking west, or if you're looking through, you're not looking north or the opposite south. You know, that kind. They're in different directions, and I haven't seen anything that aligns any particular, again, heavenly body. You know, yet, and we could be wrong about that. So that's got to be. Well, my friend from England, she has the same thing in England. I found this out after a couple podcasts with her several years ago, and she's from Avebury, right by Stonehenge. She does tours all over the world, including Egypt. It's kind of a she does like she's into spiritualism. She's earth into dowsing and earth
Mhm.
energies. And after one podcast about 6 years ago, that was the second one I think I did with her. She goes, "Stay on the line after we're done. You know, just hang on after we finish the show, Dennis, and I just got to show you something." And her audience heard that. I stayed on the line with her. You know, she did it from England. I did it from my museum. And she showed me some in Dartmoor, England, some of the megalithic walls and the structures, which I haven't been to that part of England before. I've been a lot of different places in England, Scotland, Wales, Ireland, but I never been there, that particular part of England. And she shows me her what she calls soul holes, and these look like our windows. And when she saw ours, because I think I had some pictures I was showing her during the podcast, that's what got her attention. You know, she goes, "These are ancient, they're part of the
Mhm.
megalithic sites, and our best understanding is that these were where the spirits could flow through, or they're some sort of a portal, energy portal." She goes, she's dowsed them before, and they have like an energy going through. So that was her take. I was calling them spirit windows before I talked to her. That just came to my mind. I'm like, these are like windows, but I wonder if it has something to do with spirituality. Maybe like the Egyptians had the the bar and the car, which is kind of a spirit, I guess, and they had like these frames where we can't go through these frames. They look like windows and doors on the side of walls, but they look like a frame door, but they're solid, or a window. And they say that these spirits could flow through. And I don't have the whole Egyptian mythology and religion, but my understanding is that mortals can't go through there because it's solid, but the spirits could. On the other hand, ours might be something like that, except they're kind of open, and maybe they open and shut some of these with shutters for some reason or other. You know, maybe they were shut. Maybe these were dedicated to some of their ancestors, and maybe on the day of their death, they would open up that little stone window again, open it up, and let the spirit. I mean, who knows? You know, your mind can run away,
Yeah.
and the problem is we can't really prove it. You know, we can think it might be that. We can guess that's what it is, and you see a repeating
Mhm.
pattern, and you look at other ancient cultures, what they did, and some of it's written down. That makes it a little easier when you have somebody writing down, you know, when we can translate these ancient written script like in Egypt. But Maria said, yeah, she goes, so these are soul holes. And she later on, 2 years ago, this is a few years later, she goes, by the way, in Dartmoor, we have serpentine walls. I show him pictures. I don't know if any of the windows are in the serpent. I got to ask her that next time I talk to her. If she sees any of these windows inside the serpent's body, you know, in like we have at our site, you know, and other
Yeah.
places too. So in Dartmoor, they do have the
And that,
windows and they do have the serpentine walls too.
that's what I was going to ask you too about the serpentine walls in England. Do they have, and are they similar to the ones at the site, or even here in New England, like in Connecticut? I know when I went up to visit you the first time, you had shown me through the museum, and there was a particular book. I'll never forget the cover of the book or the photograph on it. It had this particular serpentine wall, and it was very detailed. Very
Right.
detailed. I mean,
Yeah.
you couldn't. I mean, anybody would say that was a serpent, you know. And as a
Yeah.
matter of fact, when you took me out and showed me the one that I believe you had just found, and you asked me, look at it and look at the head and look at the way it's shaped, and I kept looking at it, and I could just see the details. I could make the details of the eyes, of the head, of the snake. It was very
Yeah.
interesting,
Yeah.
you know, very, very interesting, you know. And I really doubt
Good.
some of these stories that have read that you know, some people's theory about um, you know, Mystery Hill or American Stonehenge, that it was just farmers just throwing some stone together. You know what I mean? I really don't believe that, because a lot of the things that are up there, you know, they do serve a purpose. You know what I mean? Especially when I went up to, I believe it's the Oracle Chamber. Is one of these chambers have a particular window that you can see in the summer solstice? I mean, you can see the sun basically come around right in front of that window, and
It's yeah, it
it's
seems
pretty neat.
intentional. Yeah, it does seem there's a lot of details to the site, and yeah, that's out there still a little bit, Willie, that, oh yeah, some crazy farmer built that site. And the other thing I heard in the 70s, not so much today, although I'm sure that's still out there, is if this is an ancient culture of stone builders, where's the other sites around here? How can one group of people just build this site and that's it? The thing is, they don't even know. That's the thing. It kind of annoys us, and it's, after all these years, to hear that, because the material's out there. It's on social media today. You can look it up. There are about 800 locations from Quebec and Ontario that have structures that look very similar to some of the structures on our site, and they go right down to Virginia. So that question is, was your site the only one? It was built by some crazy farmer, and if it was an ancient culture, of course, you'd find more of these across the landscape. From right from the get-go, they don't know there's other sites. So you're talking to somebody that's just talking in putting forth their opinion, which is quite limited in knowledge. They just don't have the information,
Yeah.
and so they're making these statements as if they're factual, as if they have it, not only a theory, but they've proven their theory that our site is nothing more than the works of some crazy farmer had nothing better to do than build that site with his six husky sons. And actually, the Patty families were five generations of shoemakers by the time Jonathan, the one they always blame on building the site with his six husky sons. He actually had one son named Jonathan. It was like Jonathan Mellon, whatever. He died in Boston 3 days short of his 18th birthday. So that son, named after Jonathan, is like Jonathan, Jr., if you will. He died in Boston at 17 years old. The other son, the only other son they had was Seth, and he's the one that continued on, and he had a family and he had children. In fact, one of his sons named George. We talk about George. He had a shoe shop, so there's a lot of shoemakers. They weren't crazy farmers. It was by trade a cordwainer, a shoemaker, and his great great grandfather coming in from England to Virginia. Uh, Peter was a shoemaker too. He ended up in Virginia, and then he has a wife and he has a son named Seth. And he takes off for New England eventually in Salem, Massachusetts, for work, I guess. He left his wife behind and his son, and he wanted them to come up, and he sent for them a few times, and he never heard a thing. So he married another woman, and they had a son, I think, named Samuel. He never saw his first wife again. He had some problems in the town of Haverhill. They thought he abandoned his family, and they found out no, he didn't. He tried to send for him. His wife, we don't know what happened to him, his first wife, but the son, Richard, his first son from his first wife, shows up unexpectedly, I imagine, in Massachusetts. And I'm sure that Samuel thought he was going to get the inheritance. The oldest son gets the inheritance, but maybe not so much now. It's going to be Richard. And Richard's line goes through this. He has a son named Seth, and then there's Seth Jr., who probably built the wooden house on top of the property. And it was his father, Seth. So it was Peter, Richard again, and then Seth Senior. And Seth Senior in 1734 bought a piece of this hill behind us. It was still part of Haverhill, Massachusetts, 1734. And in 1741, New Hampshire, although it wasn't a state yet, it wasn't until 1788, it was still considered New Hampshire. And Massachusetts had a running dispute over the boundary. And one time it went as far north as Winnipesaukee. So they settled on a boundary where it is today. And where I
Oh
am right
wow.
now, I'm right next to the museum, is no longer part of Haverhill, Massachusetts. It was part of the Haverhill Peak, is now the Salem District. And it was a Salem District of New Hampshire until 1750 when Salem was incorporated. And we just had our 275th anniversary last year in Salem. But in 1744, 10 years after Seth bought the first piece of land, he bought another piece of land up here. And that by then it was part of New Hampshire, at that point in 1744,
Mhm.
3 years after that border dispute was settled. So, but they're all shoemakers, and a lot of you hear these people still out there, and they act like they have all the information. And this is from people with titles sometimes, from universities, professors saying, "Oh yeah, the crazy farmer built the site with his six husky sons." This goes on. I'm like, they don't
Yeah.
even have it from the start anything right about it. They're just speaking out of, I would say, ignorance with opinion. Everybody's entitled to an opinion, but it should be
Of
based on
course.
something more than just ignorance. So they're making comments about the place. They have no clue what they're talking about, but because they have a title, the people out there listening to him go, oh, this guy's a professional, he's got a title, he must know what he's talking about. And then you see some social media comments come up, oh yeah, the place is a well-known hoax, the place is a fake fraud,
Yeah.
misidentified,
And
and
they
all.
haven't,
It's
yeah,
like
and they
it's
haven't probably haven't even visited the site.
for the most part, you're absolutely right. There are a few that have been there, and a lot of them are just taking hearsay information from other people who are skeptical, have never been here, who took it from other people. It goes on and on. But because some people have titles, Dean Snow, the famous Dean Snow, Houston State University of New York, SUNY, I think. I used to see his name like in the National Geographic. We used to get that in the Smithsonian. He must have passed away quite a while ago. You can Google him. And he, 1989, I think it was, answered a New York Times syndicated column about just questions about things. And we came up, what is America's Stonehenge? And whoever answered it, either he or one of his underlings answered it and said, well, it was built by the owner in 1927 and open to the public. I'm like, my dad was born in 29. My dad's the only person that ever opened it up to the public in 1958. My dad wasn't even around when he was supposedly built the place to open it to public, I guess, as some sort of
Yep.
tourist trap, a hoax. I mean, this is a guy with a reputation,
Yep.
a doctorate or whatever, and he's well respected. And yet he said that everything he said about our site was incorrect. But people seeing that in the Times and other papers picked it up, syndication. I'm like, we saw that. I'm like, oh my God, it has to be one of the worst cases of somebody who has a title, who's supposed to be an expert, a professional, well known in his field, and he's saying stuff about the site that is 100% untrue. My dad wasn't even around when he built it. How can that be? So that kind of stuff does go on. I mean, it is
Right.
a little bit of that today,
Oh yeah.
but we just stick with the facts, data, and evidence. Let that lead us to the truth. People can have their opinions if they want. So, like somebody said, you're entitled to your opinion. You're not entitled to your own set of facts and data and evidence. And we'll stick with that. What
That's
we
right.
have, which is now
That's
90
correct.
years of work. 90 years of work coming up next year. Uh,
Long time.
1937.
It's a long time.
Yeah, a long time.
That's
Yeah.
great. Now, Dennis, through your
Hmm.
travels, and I know that you have traveled parts of Europe, of course, and all over this country, and I know you're an avid, like myself. I mean, I'm fascinated by the ancient American history. Okay, and through your travels, have you seen anything similar? Okay, along the lines of course, the serpent walls, but anything similar to what's in your site? Okay, in other parts of the
Yeah.
country.
So besides the Northeast, where these serpent walls do exist, and we found that out starting the year after I found my first couple in 16, I went to a meeting in Connecticut, and at the meeting there was a gentleman speaking about North Stonington, Connecticut, the 25 categories of structures in that one town of 35,000 acres, 8,000 structures. And that, when I saw his book before he spoke, I'm flipping through it going, this has to be the whole Northeast. And as I opened it a little bit more and started looking at it a little carefully, I saw it was North Stonington, Connecticut. I knew that Moodus, Danbury, Salem, Groton, Connecticut have structures, I mean, all over Connecticut, but never heard anything particular about North Stonington, Connecticut. I don't remember my dad talking about it. He may have. And I saw that, and I'm opening it up. All of a sudden, I start to see serpent walls as one of the 25 categories. I'm like, oh my God, he's got stone walls that are shaped like serpents like us. Up to that moment, I didn't know if any other stone walls anywhere existed that were serpentine in shape, in the Northeast. And so they're actually now they're all over the Northeast. They after this gentleman did speak about North Stonington, a woman from Denver spoke about the area east of Denver. It's very flat below Nebraska. We've been in that area, just ranch land that goes forever. She mentions a county and she talks about the stonework there. And I thought it was all dirt out there, flat dirt in a lot of ranches, with cattle and some horses and mostly cattle. But she shows her cairns, and it looked like the presentation done by that gentleman that wrote that book that you like, Markham Starr. You wrote that in 2016. Coincidentally, when I started finding my serpent walls and windows, that's another category is windows too there. And so, um, so his whole presentation was about North Stonington. He mentioned a couple of surrounding areas, with other types of serpent walls, like in Rhode Island, they're a little more squiggly. But she starts speaking and she shows cairns, just like he did. And then she shows cairns that have little chambers in them. They're called chambered cairns. And then I think there's some linear cairns
Hmm.
and other shapes. A D-shaped wall, like the letter D, and we have one at our site. I noticed when I built my diorama in college back in 1977, just to the south of the main site outside the chain link fence is a big area that looks like the letter D, just it's just weird. I said, "Oh, that looks like the letter D," and then I didn't think too much more of it at the time. That's a category in North Stonington. She shows that in Colorado. Then she shows serpentine walls. And I'm like, wow. And one of them had a triangular stone head because they come in different shapes, the heads do. Boulders or stacked heads or triangular heads, and there's some other blockhead shape too. And my wife and I both elbowed each other. And she did her presentation by Skype from Denver. She didn't fly out to do it. And it was down in Groton, Connecticut at a Holiday Inn. It was the spring meeting in 2017 of NERA. They had the spring and fall meetings. And so we were like, whoa, she's got in there too. Later on, and I wanted to talk to her, but because there were about 100 people in the audience and some people were talking to her, we never got a word in. By Skype, you can kind of talk, even in a big conference room, but I never got a chance to talk to her. I wish I had. But we did get to talk to the wife of Mark Starr, who did the first presentation, and he was very busy with other people talking, so I invited him to our site, and they came up. I think they've been to our site a couple times, and they're very, very nice. Later on, we found the serpent walls were all the way out to Weed, California, right by Mount Shasta. They're in Winnipeg, Canada. In Alabama, they call them rattlesnake walls. They're in Kentucky has a wide mouth shaped one, just like one of ours has a very
That's so
wide mouth.
interesting.
But the other thing we did know about before this, going back into probably the either late 80s or early 90s, is that some of the mounds out west were effigy shaped. And this great serpent mound in Peebles, Ohio, it's 1,350 feet long and shaped like a big S-shaped serpent. Perhaps it has an open mouth, and inside of it might be an egg, like it's actually eating an egg, and it might be representing a solar eclipse. That head is actually facing the summer solstice sunset, which is kind of cool too. And then the wiggles in the body are actually facing equinox, sunrise, sunset, and the winter solstice too. And the shape being a serpent could be the constellation Draco, the dragon, or the serpent, which you can see in the northern hemisphere. So there's a lot of stuff going there, and it's built in the middle of a meteorite crater, which they didn't know. The geologists didn't know that until I don't know how many years ago. I should Google that and find out. We did visit the Great Serpent Mound 3 years ago, and it's amazing. And it is a serpent like ours, except it's made out of earth. It is on a stone platform for the most part. They actually made a base, I guess, of stone. They show it in diagrams and pictures, but it is an earthen serpent. And again, 1,350 feet long. And the day we were there, my son met us there. My son works at Raytheon. He's an engineer, but he does rally car racing all over the Northeast. And his team went out there to race in Chillicothe, where there's some gigantic earthworks, which are just simply amazing. We got to see them too. And they had time to actually meet us. We had driven up from Georgia to my in-laws in South Carolina, and then we met them with our brand new RV we had bought in Georgia right at the Serpent Mound. And I think there were like 6 or 7 people, and some were still coming, part of his team, and we got all these young people at the Serpent Mound, and we all took a tour together. And I think that really impressed them, to see this magnificent serpent, this huge earthworks that people built. Some people suggest the evidence indicates 400, almost 400 BC, almost, and the earlier dates were 1100 AD, Fort Ancient, but so they're arguing how old the Serpent Mound is, but it's ancient no matter what. It's pretty old. It could be before the time of Christ it was built and then repaired later on around the 1100s. We have been to Fort Ancient, which they said they named the culture after that, but it's an amazing. Now there are 95 of those, Willie. I think they go out to Iowa. 94 or 95 serpent.
All the way out there.
Yeah, and I haven't seen the other ones except in a few pictures. There was an alligator. Some people say it's a salamander mound, and that was, I think that one's near Newark, because between Chillicothe, which is southeast or south of Columbus, I used to do a lot of overnights in Columbus, and then east is Newark of Columbus. That's 65 miles. There is a 200-foot road with curbing that was built by ancient man. Why would you need a 65-mile road 200 feet wide with curbing? And they found that by satellite. And we were talking about satellites when we had a little conversation about satellites. I think satellite,
Yes, correct.
maybe LiDAR. And every time I used to fly into Columbus and do an overnights and stuff, I would try to, because when you're landing, you can kind of see in front of you. When you're climbing out, taking off, you can't see too much because you're going up in this, But anyway, and you're really accelerating out of there. But when I used to go into Columbus a lot, I often look down to see if I could see any trace of the road itself. I knew where Newark was, you could see the city over there. And, Chillicothe's way off to the south, and I could never really see it with my eyes. But they say that the satellite, I think, and aerial imaging showed this road, and they discovered it. I guess they've done excavations on it, but a 200-foot wide road between these two gigantic complexes, you know. So some people suggest it's like a spiritual thing, kind of like a sacred pathway between them, you know. I mean, you could drive 18 wheels
Yes.
on that thing when it was brand new, side by side by side by side. It's actually the same width as a I flew Pease Air Force Base. It used to be a SAC base with B-52s. And when they built that in the
Hmm.
50s, they made it 200 feet wide. Normally, runways are about 150 feet wide, pretty generally 150 by various lengths, you know, thousands of feet in length. This thing is as wide as a shack. I'm not saying it was used for airplanes, but I'm just saying this was a magnificent, huge undertaking to not only flatten the area and to make the curbs. It was curved on both sides of of this pathway, you know. So, you know,
Yep.
so the Great Serpent Mound is pretty amazing. So it, you know, so I was aware that I would say going back to one book came out in 1988, Natasha Peterson. She wrote Sacred Sites, and we're in that. I remember that. I remember meeting her. And then I think Brad Olson did a similar book a little later. And a lot of these
Yes.
books, and there are
Yep.
several
Brad
others,
Wilson. Yep.
talk about these cool things like the serpent, you know. And so that's when you become familiar.
Yep.
And then years later, you get a chance to visit them, you know, which is kind of neat, you know, go out there and actually see something you've been reading
Yep.
about for decades, you know.
Yeah. When you see them with your own eyes, it just gives it a different look than from
Yeah.
what you've been in the book. You know what I mean?
Right. Oh,
You see it
got to
with your
be there.
own
You got to,
eyes.
yeah,
Yeah, you're really impressed. I'm pretty sure of
yeah,
that. You know,
yeah,
Dennis, as far as temple mounds in let's say pyramid mounds, correct? Or these mounds, how many are there in the United States and specifically in Ohio? I know that you have some pretty good knowledge on
yeah.
that, but
Right.
there's
I'll see what I've read for estimates. That's a great question because I've come across in this, you know, over the years, and what I've seen is an estimate. This, I don't know how accurate it is in 2026, but I have seen up to 1 million mounds were built in the Ohio, Mississippi Valley, all the way out to the spiral mounds in
a
Oklahoma.
million mounds.
Yeah, they estimate 1 million mounds. Now, I don't know how accurate that estimate is. I'll throw it out there. Some of your audience can maybe dig into it a little bit more and say, well, no, the number is actually this. But I have seen that figure. And in Ohio, the estimate was 10,000 mounds in Ohio, 5,000 in Indiana. And in both cases, about 90% of them are gone today due to there is normal erosion by Mother Nature, but a lot of it was farming too. You know, when you're out there doing agriculture and you're
Right.
cultivating the land, they actually causes damage to the mounds, and in some cases they actually intentionally mow down the mounds. You know, because you're in the way. We got your
Hmm.
Farmer Smith and Farmer Jones out there, and they got these things in the way. They actually eventually by
Progress.
yeah, you know, I saw I saw films of people actually with oxen. I think it was either oxen or workhorses actually pulling these drags to knock down some of the pyramids. And now, some of them originally were, you know, dozens of feet tall. In other cases, they were only like 10 feet tall, 12 feet tall, or something like that. Maybe the Serpent Mound was several feet tall when it was originally built. And so they're still a little bit in the way. If you're trying to plow a field, they still be in a way. And even if you don't directly go out and try to bulldoze it down using animals or bulldozers, you know, in more modern times, just going over it with your plows, eventually the erosion from rain and just going over it, plowing and plowing, kind of it will actually cause the mounds to, you know, flatten out, I guess. Because we were at a bunch of them now in the last few years since we got our RV 3 years ago. And you walk around and you'll see signs saying there was a mound that used to be here, and they give you the size of it and the height of it, and what you're looking at is gigantic field is just a little bump, and that's what's remaining of it today. It was like, oh my God, that thing was like
Wow.
10 feet tall or 12 feet tall, and it was a big platform, probably ceremonial platform. And when you look at it today, you can
Hmm.
hardly tell where the it's so almost level with the natural field now, with just a little bump. It's like, wow, how when you like to see a time lapse or pictures of it or what the heck happened to it, you know? But they say between erosion and plowing that 90% of them are gone today, and they continue right out to Illinois. They go into Wisconsin, Iowa, and they're and the spiral mounds in Oklahoma, and Texas has the Cato mounds. I think they're more up in the eastern part of Texas, kind of in the northeast part of Texas, above Tyler. They're a ways above Tyler, Texas. I have a friend that lived down in Bullard, and she used to go to Tyler. She goes, "Oh, they're above Tyler, heading north. You'll see the Cato mounds." So they're all over the landscape. And I mean, they're in Louisiana has a Poverty Point, which we've been to. What an amazing complex that is. Alabama has Moundsville, Alabama. But in Indiana, one's called Mound State Park. It's called Mound State Park in Indiana. I have a picture from 120 years ago, and although they're earthen mounds built by ancient man, which are pretty amazing, I mean they are amazing, really. Across the White River, it's called the White River, and I had a picture from like 120 years ago. It's in my 20,000 photographs, and I still can't find it again. You know, I clicked on it, a screenshot or whatever. It's in on the screenshots,
Yep.
and yeah, it's got to be on the screenshots, I think. No, I'm trying to think of that if I did get that on screenshot. I either took a picture of that off paper, so it might be in my album or screenshots. I don't know, but I've looked for it and I can't find it. There is actually a wall in the middle of the river, and it's S-shaped, just like our S-shaped serpent wall that you mentioned earlier. Ours was
Wow.
almost 140 feet in length. I would say this one's maybe about half of that. It's right in the middle of the river, kind of heading, I suppose, east because it looks like the river heads south, I think. I Google Earthed it. When I look at it on satellite or, to see a picture of the go up and down the river today, I can't find it. And I met a family that lives near there, and they said, it could have been washed out by nature, but it also people kayak and canoe. And if that's going across the river, like you said, it was probably an obstacle. So somebody could have been in there knocking it down. Or when Google
Yep.
took the picture, the river was really high from rain or whatever. And I called that museum out there, the state park, and the woman goes, "I have no idea what you're talking about. Call back tomorrow and talk to somebody. I know Elizabeth or whatever." I tried calling back. I could never get a hold of her to find out if she knew anything about it. But it looks like our S-shaped serpent wall in the mound complex. So that's in Indiana.
Yep. Now, Dennis, these mounds and these, um, of course, S-shaped walls, snake walls there, how many of them you think are in public lands or in private property also? And who is really taking the initiative to protect these sites?
Yeah, that's it. I don't know, you know, the percentage that are on, say, private property versus state property, town, or the ones we saw in Ohio were um, just recently, when we were there in September, they were made United Nations World Heritage Sites. They were on the list, and they actually all got accepted. That was the Site Mound, which is close to the Ohio River, and that's a state park. And then there's a Serpent Mound, which I believe is owned by the Ohio. It's an organization in Ohio. There's a name for it. I would try to put it to memory, but it's not federal. It's actually state. That's now in the National
Uh-huh.
Register. Chillicothe and Newark also were made part of the UNESCO World Heritage Sites, and that's really nice. It gives them a little, it gives them more attention. It makes them known to the world, if you will. Um, and
Yes.
probably for funding too and research and study, where you always need money for, doing that kind of work, and it takes quite a bit of money. It gets that recognition. It gets them some protection, and again, it probably gets some funding to help preserve and also to do further research on these. We have that same problem at our site, but the percentage that's owned like by the federal government, state, local, town, or whatever, or private, I'm not really sure the makeup of that. I would say a lot of them are on farmers' lands, and even some of the places we visited at one time were owned by farmers, and then the state came along, purchased the property, and then they made a state park out of it, like Fort Ancient or whatever. And
Okay.
the Newark Mounds, the Great Circle is amazing. You can visit that right now, and they got a nice visitor center. And you walk, and I think it's 1,230 feet roughly across in diameter. Huge ditch, circular, and huge bank, and it's in the middle of it's a bird effigy. You go to the middle of it, and this thing is huge. It's like, oh my God, these people! And you stand there, this thing's enormous, and that's only one small piece of the whole Newark because the rest of it, or a good deal of the rest of it, is built under a golf course. And because it was made a UNESCO World Heritage Site, I believe it was 2023 we were there. I'm trying to remember. Yeah, it was 2023, the year we bought our RV, and we had bought it in Georgia, and we drove it up, and that's when we met my son there at the Great Serpent Mountain. Um, so. They made a world United. I think it was in September of that year, like around the 20 something or other. They made them all. They designated in that. What they're going to do is they're going to pay the people that own the golf course, and they're going to have them move to a new area and build the golf course. And a lot of people were upset they
Oh,
built the
wow.
golf course on it, but they said actually, in a way, if you look at Newark today and you see how I thought Newark was going to be a small little town. It's actually kind of really built up. And you go to the Great Circle and you feel like you're in the woods kind of a bit, and it's a beautiful area with this gigantic earthen bank circle. And if you look across the way where some of the other mounds are, I think there's a big square. There's a octagonal shaped one too, and there's some other things that connect them. It's just all built up. So that could have happened where the golf course is today. The golf course actually, they didn't plow down the mounds, from my understanding. They just built over the whole complex and left it there, versus a shopping center or a housing development. They would just leveled it, and you wouldn't have much to show today. They're like, well, we're going to take it back, but
Yep.
it's been destroyed. There's cellar holes there. There's buildings, foundations there. There's roads. So the golf course actually
Yep.
kind of, I suppose, preserved it, and they're going to move it. And when you look at Ohio, I used to fly in and out of there, and you've probably been through there. It's huge. There's certainly a lot of property you can build a
Yes,
golf
it is.
course. And I
And
think
and they're
they could
flat.
have a new clubhouse. They'll have a new clubhouse, and maybe they'll have really nice greens and everything. Maybe it's a win-win. And then they're going to open up that part of it to the public, because they say now you can only go there on Mondays. But Mondays, the golf course, they spray. I don't know if you want to be walking around out there looking at these mounds with spray chemicals. I don't think that.
Yep.
And then they have a couple days during the year where they let people come in, open it up, and nobody's going to hit you with a ball. But now they're going to open it up eventually, and I don't know what the status is 3 years later. I don't know how far they're moving along with the golf course and everything. So I suppose a golf course was a better thing than if you just flatten it for homes or buildings, or put a mall there or something like that.
Mhm.
But that's all going to be opened up to the public. But between them, it's really built up. I mean, it's like 6 lanes of hot business roads, big wide roads with businesses. I mean, I had no idea how built up it was. And but something really cool. And then you go down to Chillicothe. It was much more rural, I felt. You go from, I think there are 5 complexes you can see in Chillicothe, very similar to Newark, octagonal, round shaped structures, square shapes, very, very similar. And then they got that 200-foot wide road. I think it's 65 miles long. I will say the Great Circle in Newark looked to me, if I closed my eyes and I ended up in Avebury, where my friend Maria Wheatley lives right by there, I would think I was in the same complex, because the bank and ditch look identical, except in Avebury, they got those gigantic, monoliths there, the circles.
Yep.
We've been there a few times, and they have a town built in the middle of it out of some of the ancient stonework. They're actually topple some of the great big menhirs or monoliths, and they would, I think, heat them up. They build a big fire, topple them into the fires, really heat them up, and then they would pour water. Some people said vinegar, to thermal shock the rocks, and then they would strike them and try to break them into small pieces. And they used that for building some of the buildings there, like the Red Lion Inn and stuff in Avebury. So there's a village built in the middle of that, Avebury in England. So a long time ago, probably several hundred years ago, we've been there a couple times. But the bank and ditch, it's the same diameter as the one in Newark, from my understanding. And when you look at it, they look identical, except one doesn't have the big stones. It has that bird, earthen effigy, which is big, maybe an eagle. And then you go to
Yep.
Avebury, and it's all the big massive stones stood up in it. But the funny thing is, like, the same diameter. And maybe one of your listeners can get a little bit better. I mean, you can Google that, and I pulled it up and looked at it. I said, well, it looks like it's the same diameter, and I've seen it mentioned. I think that should be double checked. But it's and actually Newark is a lunar observatory. Apparently they weren't tracking the sun, from my understanding. It was a lunar observatory for the 18-and-a-half-year lunar cycle, which we have at our site too. And we just went through that phase
So
in the last
that is
just
very
recently.
interesting.
Yeah. So
Yeah, that's
the
very,
last
very
2 years
interesting,
we
Dennis.
had the
But
lunar
really,
alignments here.
yep. Oh, Dennis, going back to Mark Eddy, right? In some of
Mark,
these
yep.
conferences also, yeah, I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure that you have attended many of the conferences. What has been the talk or the theory? Is it the same group of people who have gone and um, of course, I mean, I know that there's been talk about the Vikings, you know what I mean, and the Druids. and so forth. But what is the latest theory as far as how who built these complexes? Are they particularly the same people, or has it been knowledge has been passed down, or there had to been some trade, involved, and there's some interchange in cultures. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's always been the question as to, as you mentioned at the beginning of the show, of who were the people that built this? Where did they come from? Why did they build this? What did they use it for? And what became of these people? How did they abandon? As I guess any ancient site around the world, as you go back in time, they've all been abandoned pretty much. For the most part, there are a few exceptions where there are still cities built on, old complexes still going on today. But for the most, even the Mayans, you see all the Mayan ruins. We've been down to quite a few Mayan ruins, and and that was more in the Yucatan. We've been to the heartland of Mexico too, and all these abandoned sites, at Teotihuacan, and Monte Alban. We've been to Mitla, Coba, and then Tulum and all those, and they're all abandoned, hundreds and hundreds of years ago. So what happened to these people? And it's still a bit of a mystery there, although they say some pretty good ideas what might have happened, with some warfare between them, maybe some environmental changes, I guess, but I'm not sure. At least Dad's not sure either. But were these people indigenous, Native Americans that built this? That question should be asked because we know now in New Hampshire, near Keene, which is on the west side of New Hampshire, near the Connecticut River, the New Hampshire Archaeological Society has some 13,000-year-old settlement, which is amazing because the Younger Dryas was still going on during that time, that last little ice age they had. How did these
Yep.
people survive that? I don't know, but apparently they did. And there are some paleo sites up north too, up near uh, the town of it's where Santa's Village is, Jefferson, New Hampshire. And there's two rivers up there, and on those two
It's
rivers they
way up
found some
there.
paleo, which is 10,000 years and all that. Because we used to have questions like, if your site is maybe 4,000 years old from the data we had, who would have been here 4,000 years ago? A lot of people, I would say a lot of people actually over, and I've been a guide there since 1970, and I've heard that question all those years, even today, a bit. Who was here in New Hampshire 4,000 years ago? It's like, well, people were here. Now we know. We used to think several thousand years. Now they're putting it back to about 13,000 years over on the western part of the state. They may have been right here too. Um, so that's a great question. But when you look at the style of the construction of this site and all those others across the Northeast, they do have a resemblance to old world, megalithic sites. Everything from the standing, either monoliths or the menhirs, which are the taller ones, and we have one of those that's 14 feet plus. It fell over, or the chambers like the V hut, looks like wedge tombs I've seen in Ireland, and they always face southwest. They were used for tombs, but they were shaped kind of like a wedge or a V, and down to a detail like most of the ones we see in pictures. When my dad and I visited Ireland, we got to see a couple of them in person. They're really cool. The little stones on one side of them like slabs, and what it looks like, those are used to close it up at times, and then they will move the side. Ours has the same thing. On the right side, as you're looking into it, there's slabs on one side of the structure. Um, and they're in Spain too. These V-shaped structures, and again, probably used as tombs. The east-west chamber at our site looks like the galley or gallery graves. They're in northwest Ireland, which I didn't get to visit. They're also in Holland, which I've never been to, but they're in France near Carnac, where the 3,500 stones are standing. But we've been there. My wife and I visited that site. Spent quite a bit of time there. And they have a chamber that looks like our chamber in ruins too. The chamber in ruins is the chamber with that big roof slab collapse. I saw one of the chambers near
Yeah.
those rows in Karnak. I'm like, and I'm still trying to Google that because I didn't have my camera. This is 1984. My wife had the camera. It has her. We rented bicycles at the train station. Went from Paris out there on a train, and we were riding our bikes. We stayed at a B&B, I guess, uh, there. And my wife was ahead of me on her bike, and I saw this sign. I think it was in Gaelic and French, and it pointed to the left. And it looked interesting to me. I don't know why. So I said, I'm going to take a left. And I yelled to my wife, hey, hold on. I got to see this. She never heard me. I didn't see her for 3 or 4 hours later. She was so mad at me. We got lost on bicycles. I didn't see it till we got back that evening, back at the B&B. I found my way back.
Oh
She
man.
had the camera. She had a Nikon camera. I didn't have we no cell phones in 1984, so I got in there without a camera. I'm looking at it, I go, oh my gosh, it looks like our chamber in ruins, but the roof is still intact. And I wanted to get a photograph. I've gone back to that area, Karnak, and Googled it and moved down the streets, and I have no idea what the name of that structure was. I think the name was there, probably in Gaelic and in French, but that was I forgot what it was. And anyway, I cannot find what that chamber is. I've asked friends that have gone back to Karnak, and nobody's reported back with that chamber yet. But we also saw ones that are shaped like our east-west chamber right near down the road, and they always run true east and west. They have big slabs, orthostats stood on their end with roof slabs on top, like our structure, or they're big boulders that are kind of like flat almost, and they're stood on their end. And they were used for tombs too, you know. So we have that going on, the size, the shape, and orientation out of true north. And then there's a couple other structures that reminded me of our site too. Um, like there's another chamber called the Patty Chamber. It kind of looks like the larger chamber in ruins, and they both have windows. Actually, the chamber in ruins has two windows. We were talking about windows earlier. They both face the south. That's not like what a root cellar would be doing in New England. They usually face them away from the warming sun, you know. But in any event, these structures
Okay.
look so much like what I've seen. And actually, megalithic sites are on 6 continents of the world. They're in South Africa, they're in South America and Ecuador. There's also the Brazil Stonehenge, which is actually in French New Guinea, I think it's called. It's just above the border in Brazil. They're in they're also in Russia. Ural Mountains have a website with 3,500. And you look at some of them, they look like some of our structures, including one that looks just like the Oracle Chamber. And one of them kind of looks, I think it looks like one of our galley graves. So the Ural Mountain website, megalith, you have to put the word megalith, is a pretty good website, or it was.
Yeah.
I looked at it last a couple of years ago. They're in China. I looked at a website there. They have, it's pre-classic. It goes back to the Neolithic time period of Europe, if you will. They look like what you see in Western Europe. And then you go to India, has them. And then you get into, and then you get out to Australia, and New Zealand is the last one I heard. New Zealand has
That's
megalith.
very
The only thing is
that's
the
very
Antarctica is a
interesting.
place that I don't think there are any, but there's been arguments on that. So every continent except the Antarctic,
Well,
I'm aware, has megalithic sites. Maybe some under the ice. I have no clue on that. But so they're worldwide, and they have a resemblance. The size, the shape, the orientations, very similar. You brought up a
yeah,
good point, though, Willie. Maybe people were communicating. Maybe they were trading. Maybe they're traveling the oceans, you know, at a much earlier time, going further than we ever thought. It's possible. Yeah, unless
oh,
these
yeah.
are all just coincidences. I don't think they're coincidences, though. But
No, they're not. And I wanted to ask you, you know, that many people have, you know, they hear us probably discussing this, but I don't think they, even in photos, don't do it justice. But for example, the east and west chamber. Now you got those two pieces of stone, and you got the top, the very top slab. What is the estimated weight on each of those? Because they're
yeah,
pretty.
that's yeah, they're pretty rock solid. The weight on granite is about 163 pounds per cubic foot. So you just kind of go out with a tape measure and you get the measurements, the height, the width, and depth. And so they weigh probably a couple of those might weigh like a ton, ton and a half. The biggest slab near the east-west chamber is actually the it's a two-story structure. It's the only one that's on our site. It's facing east, like some of them face east. And by the way, a lot of the structures on the site, they face true north and south, east and west. Nothing to do with magnetic. That slowly changes. The magnetic north pole and south, it changed. This this is interesting. They actually orientated it cardinal, you know, true north, east, and west. So the east-west chamber runs true east and
Yeah.
west. And just to the east of that is that double solar chamber near the Oracle chamber. And that it consists of 2 stories, and the roof of the first story is about a 14-ton slab. It came from the bedrock about 20 feet away, and it was one edge of it was created by a fault. It's like an earthquake fault line or joint, and I know they're different. But I used to call it an earthquake fault line. It runs across the entire hilltop. It splits our main site kind of right in half. It bisects it east and west. It's a natural thing that happened, and it happened probably a few 100,000 years ago. The whole hill is split in half, and it actually one part of it's a little higher than the other part, and it's also moved. One part is moved
Mhm.
east or west in relationship to the other, and it made a beautiful crack around the whole thing. And so these ancient people were able to use that edge and they were able to get underneath the stone and actually separate it from the bedrock because it is kind of like an onion. It does come up in layers. And this 14-ton stone was moved about 20 feet. They got it up, moved it up, they raised it off the ground probably about 4 or 5 feet, and then they put it on top of the first story of the structure, and then they built the other structure on top of it. So we do have a two-story building. The floor of one or the roof of the other, it's about 28,000 pound stone, and you can do the math, by the height,
Oh
width,
my
and
God.
length of it, and 163 pounds. The table weighs about 4.5 tons, and I know that was an estimate, so I went up and I kind of measured it, and I kind of did the math on it. I'm like, damn, that does. They were because sometimes Goodwin back in the 30, sometimes you see some estimates of some stones. You're like, I think he was off a little bit, exaggerating or something like that. I mean, it can happen, especially if you don't have a clear view of the
Yep.
rock because of brush and stuff like that. But at the table, he estimated, I think, was 4.5 tons, and I did the math, and it was roughly 9,000 pounds. I'm like, oh, that's very close, within very, very close to what he said. So, it's not
That's a lot of weight to
it's a
be.
lot of weight. Yeah, it's not
Yeah, a
styrofoam they
lot
were
of weight
moving
that you're
around.
not gonna be moving it. Yeah. Yeah. I don't
Yeah,
know, for us, I can't imagine moving it that easily. So these
yeah.
people were were very ingenious,
They
you
didn't
know?
just go up there and throw this thing together for a joke. That's for sure.
No, no,
They,
no, not at all.
I, I
Not at
would say
all.
that if 15 acres where all the astronomical marker stones are, where the sun rises sets over, it's about 15 acres of the 106 acres, and there are stone walls
Mhm.
all over the 106 acres and serpent walls. That area there had by 1989, Dr. David Stewart Smith had been with us for 12 years, and he did a inventory of slabs that were not field stones left by the glaciers. These are which farmers used to make walls out of, mostly rounded kind of. These were all slabs,
Yep.
And he said these slabs indicate these people were actually detaching them from the bedrock. So they went out there, they had to separate them. That's a bit of work trying to drive wedges in there and separate each piece of slab, and then remove it from the bedrock, and then and most of them do show signs of being shaped. There's actually the scallop on, just like an arrowhead. You see the dimpling. You see that on the edge of these stones. So they're
Yeah.
actually dressing it or shaping it. So you had to get it. You had to get the bedrock. You had to find maybe like a crack in it or something, and drive wedges in there and pop it off. Hopefully, you get the piece of size stone you want, and then start shaping it. And then you transported it. How many feet you wanted to move it to the wall, and some of them were stood on the edge as orthostats. You were mentioning those earlier, like the east-west chamber, but there's no roof on it. There's a
Yes.
lot of those, and that caught my dad's eyes back in the 50s, and it caught other researchers' eyes too. It's like farmers usually didn't do that. In other cases, they're stood up on their end, and these are more like the astronomical alignments, like arrowheads. In other cases, the flat stones, are stacked on top of each other like this, and sometimes at funny angles too. And as opposed to farmers' walls, which are more rounded field stones that are just stacked on top of each other. And that'll be in my new book I'm doing a whole chapter on farmers' walls and everything. So the whole different type of material or shape of material, if you will, because these are slabs that were part of the bedrock versus stones that were tumbled in by the glacial period and just deposited all over the hill, which they did use too. So in that 15 acres, Dave inventoried over 300 stones, and he wrote a booklet about that in 1989, Ancient and Modern Quarry Techniques, which we used to sell. We should probably reprint it. Dave died 10 years ago, but it was very well written, very scholarly, but written so people could understand it. And the amount of work that went into just that 15 acres of land. And then outside of that, they never did do the inventory, but I can tell you that the walls go all over the next 90 acres, and there's flat slabs out there too that somebody should go out there and count them someday, because that's all man hours of work. It's not somebody just going out
Well,
there
of
simply
course. I
picking
mean,
up a round rock and throwing it into the wall. It's actually quarrying
well,
the stone off the bedrock, if you will. That's and shaping it.
mhm. And this area is very known for its ledge. There's
Mhm.
plenty of ledge in this part of the country.
You can
You
see it
know.
at our site for sure. You can see it everywhere, but our site too when you
Oh
visit it.
yeah.
And we have a glacial
Yeah.
cliff shelter too, and
No.
you can see the ledge there for sure. A lot of the serpent walls in Stonington, Mark Starr, who wrote the book, mentions are on like bedrock, kind of an outcropping or kind of a ridge, more like a ridge, I guess. And that's my first serpent wall I ever found in the spring of 2016. You know, it was like I saw this wall many times. It was the one of the trails that went to my dad's house. We used it for snowshoeing in the winter for our visitors. It's all marked. And I was going through there in 2016, heading in that direction, probably picking up firewood for our home or whatever. It was in the spring. And I saw that wall again, but it caught my eye this time. I kind of just one of those things. I go by it many times, didn't pay a lot of attention to it. And so I stopped my ATV. I walked about 60 feet or so, went over to it, and I looked at it, and I'm looking at the south side of it. It was kind of, I'm looking at it to the west. So the south side, like, it looked like a square kind of a headish shape. It had maybe fallen from a horizontal position, but then I noticed the wall, and it was only less than 30 feet long, and the wall tapered down it's very subtle. It actually tapers down, and at the end of it there's a flat rectangular slab on the ground, and I'm like, that's a tail, you know. It just caused, and it had like little rounded corners. That's not too important, but it's kind of rectangular, little round corner. And I'm looking at it going, is
Yep.
that a head? Am I looking at a body? Am I looking at the tail? And then I noticed that it's sitting on a ridge of bedrock, you know. It just sits right on the edge of it. And this wall doesn't encompass any kind of area. Like farmers' walls usually go around big fields, you know, field clearings, boundaries, and stock fences, and they're usually fairly straight walls with some exceptions. This is a small section of stone. It seemed to taper down to that flat stone, kind of running to the south, it looked like, kind of a southerly direction. And I think I got a snake. I'm like, I think I have a serpent wall here, you know, but I never heard of a serpent wall. I'm like, am I imagining this? Am I seeing things? It's like looking at a cloud and seeing a face, that pareidolia, you know, kind of thing. I'm like, but I think this thing is
Oh
physical.
yeah.
It really looks like a snake. I showed it to some people later on, and by then I had already found what I thought was another one. It was a big S-shaped one, you know. And I said, it's got a triangular head. It sweeps. As you're looking to the north, it's facing south like that other one. They're both facing south, both of these first two serpents I found. And it got a big S shape to it, and it runs about 137 feet in length, you know. And then I found a couple more of those, and I started showing more people. And Scott Walters happened to be in with a whole group of people. He was still on at that time. He was still on the America on Earth. I think he had moved over to. He was moving over to Discovery Network from History Channel, and I showed it to uh, he and his wife and Alan Butler, who's from England, who's on History Channel quite a bit, um, and his wife and a bunch of other people. And they're looking at it going like, it does look like a snake. It does look a serpentine shape to it, you know. And we're all aware of the Serpent Mound in, you know, Ohio too. And I think you got something here, you know. So that's how that whole started, you know, at that time, you know. And the ones in North Stonington, a lot of them are on ridges of bedrock. Not all of them, but a lot of them have that right on the edge of a ridge, and you'll have a serpent wall. Others are in different locations, coming out of swamps or going into swamps. And our south wall, we used to call it, we think is a serpent also. It is running true south and north, and the tail of it is on the north side of it. And if you went straight on the body north, you'd end up going to the astronomical viewing platform where those two cairns used to be that mark the astronomical center, and also the true north monolith, that beautiful monolith that's, if you stood in the center of the astronomical, you look at that in the evening, you look up and you'll see Polaris today above it. 4,000 years ago, it was a star called Thuban, and Thuban, or Alpha Draconis, it's not the brightest star in that constellation, but the constellation is Draco the dragon or the serpent. So some people suggest even at the Great Serpent Mound, when you visit, they'll say that it's a possibility that that constellation back then, with its star Thuban, oh, they have to go back a little bit earlier in time when that was a pole star. But if you're looking at it at night, it looks like a great serpent in the sky, and that may have inspired the people at Serpent Mound to build a serpent shape. It's a possibility. We really can't talk to the
Mm.
people that built it, and I think
I
that may have
wonder.
inspired our stone builders. You know.
I wonder if it would line up also at some point. You
Yeah, I
know.
mean it. Yeah, the Thuban around 4,000 years ago was over the. It was over the North Pole. It was a pole star at that time, and the Great Pyramid of about 4,600 years ago. Some people suggest the pyramids are older than that, but by that time, that shaft would have been pointing at Thuban. And in the course of the evening back then, they would watch, you know, Thuban rotate around uh, a Draco actually rotate around its star, North Star, Thuban. It would actually gone around it during the course of the night on a clear night. You could actually see that, and that was an important point. You know, Egyptians thought that was eternity or heaven, or they had a name for it actually. They thought that was a gateway to heaven. Some cultures, other cultures did too, but it was a star that didn't move in the sky. It stays in one position. Today it's Polaris, and it wobbles a little
Yes.
bit. And Thuban would wobble too. Polaris is a little bit brighter than Thuban, but still it would have been something in the night sky, under dark skies, back then without the city lights and everything. To look up there and see this kind of a serpent-shaped star constellation, and they were building these serpents. It could be also they worship the serpents, like we have snakes in New Hampshire, and at one time we had rattlesnakes, and they were. I think they're back now, but they eliminated them. They say in the 1800s, because they were kind of dangerous, and they wanted to get rid of them. But the
Of
Egyptians
course.
had the cobra, and Saint Patty had the serpent worship. He was getting out of Ireland, and Adam and Eve with the serpent. I mean, it's all over the world, dragons or serpents, it seems to be very important to people.
Yep.
So we have a hill of serpents for sure. My wife doesn't like snakes, but now we got 16 serpents on the hill, Doesn't please her a lot because she doesn't like snakes. I don't mind them that much. Most of them are harmless up here, I just look at them,
You know.
but they are a little
Oh, they do
creepy
have
sometimes.
that. Oh yeah. I mean, that's a phobia that I believe a lot of people have.
They
I
do,
like to
yeah.
say maybe like 90%.
My
I mean,
grandfather
those
had that
snakes don't
too.
bother me too much.
Yeah, my
But
grandfather was petrified of them. My
the
grandson.
arachnids, yeah, the arachnids are the one that do it for me.
Yeah, yeah.
You know? Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. But Dennis, as far as the facility and what are your upcoming events that you have at American Stonehenge?
Sure. Yeah, we're open every day of the year except Christmas and Thanksgiving. Our next big event coming up will be in about 3 weeks. It'll be on the 21st, a Sunday, and it'll be the summer solstice. And we'll have a ceremony. Katja's been coming up since the early 90s. She's originally from Holland, and she puts on about a 3-hour ceremony about, I think, roughly 1 o'clock to 4 o'clock. And it'll be on top of the hill in an area we call the Gathering. It's a nice, big, wide open area. And she'll be doing a ceremony, and the public's invited to participate or they can watch. That evening, our manager, James, will be leading a drum circle on the site. I think his drum circle we'd have to check the website because it'll have all of this on there. I'm going to say 6:30 to 7:30 or something like that. It could be 6 to 7. It's about a 1 hour drumming circle. People can bring their own drums, and we also have drums available to purchase at our museum too. And we'll be there in the morning that morning for sunrise. It's at 5 something in the morning. And the sun sets around 8:20. I think I have to look up the actual minutes, but we'll be there probably
Yeah,
to 9 o'clock at night. I think, but
yeah, I'm on the site right now, and it says Summer Solstice Sunset Drum Circle is going to be on June 21st, Sunday, June 21st, I
yeah,
believe.
that sounds good. What time is that? Is that you
Yes.
could tell me? Is that is it at 6 or 7 o'clock at night? Or?
I'm at the site right now. So, um, and of course I want to go also. So
Well,
I
you're
do want to
welcome.
go, and I believe
You and
it's
your family, Willie, come on up anytime, and that'd be a nice day if the weather's good. We can only hope so.
well, thank you
You
very
never know.
much. As a
Yeah.
matter of fact, I believe it starts at 7:30 p.m. to
Okay.
8:30 p.m.
Okay. Yeah.
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 So I mean
A
that's
little later
a
than that. Yeah.
fantastic event. I think the one that I went was in the morning.
Oh, you did.
I
Okay. Oh, you
think.
did. Okay. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. I think the one I went to was in the morning. And of course, I know there's plenty of events at the site. I believe the site is StonehengeUSA.com.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, if um, again, it's a fantastic site, and it's worth every cent. And I think you're going to be leaving there with a lot more questions than you do answers.
Like we
I
do every
believe because I
day.
felt that way.
You felt that way. That's the way we feel too. And when they go to the website, they can
Yeah,
actually,
I just
yeah, it has a 11-minute video they can watch too, on the website and that free mobile app download. They can actually do a free, complete virtual tour from their couch at home, and it doesn't cost anything. And it's kind of what you do when you come to our site. You can use that at the site too. It's iPhone or Android. You just download it, and at home you can do a virtual tour and see everything that normal visitors see on their tour of the 15 acres, and and it's kind of cool. And they can decide whether they're interested in something like this or not. And then the 11-minute videos right there too. It only takes about 11 minutes to watch it. We have that in our theater, so when they come, they can watch it at our place. A lot of people choose to watch it at home. They want to know a little bit about the site, whether they're interested in it or not. Then when they come, they have a if they do, they understand the site. They come up and they know what they're gonna see, which is kind of cool,
Correct.
So, but yeah, we
Yep.
have drumming circles. Not only in the summer solstice, we have drumming circles. We have VIP tours. James is leading most of those right now. Those are by reservation. That will take you on the site and also out on some of the other 90 acres outside the 15 acres. There's some of the serpent walls, windows, that kind of thing. And James narrates the whole thing. I was doing a lot of those, but now I got my hip thing. I can't do a lot of walking at the moment. And James is doing a great job. I may get
Yeah.
back to doing a few of those, because I enjoy them too. But until I have my little operation, I'm not going to be doing too much walking up there right now, and hopefully I can by the end of the summer, maybe, when I get through that.
Well, you'll
But
have a speedy recovery.
yeah,
You
I hope
you
so.
will.
Yeah, I'm
You
looking
will.
forward to that.
You
Thank you,
will.
Willie.
You
Yeah,
will.
appreciate that.
Yeah, my knee was different, you know what I mean, when I had my knee done, so that was pretty different, but I know that,
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure you'll be up and walking and you'll be alright, you
yeah.
know?
So yeah, you can do
You'll
the
notice
knee
a
thing.
change.
Yeah.
You'll notice a change. Yeah, you'll notice a change. Dennis,
Yeah.
thank you very much, and I wanted to tell you that Heather Arnold says hi. She sends her regards.
Oh,
Uh,
okay.
I
Yeah, yeah.
interviewed her, I think it was episode 3. Episode 3, I interviewed her, and, she says hi, and she's, planning to pay you a visit,
I haven't
sometime
heard
this
from
year.
her for a year and a half. I was wondering if she was okay. I should reach out to her. For several years, I was in contact with her pretty frequently, and all of a sudden I lost contact, and I didn't know if something happened. But I really appreciate that. And so she was on recently with you, just a short time ago on one of your
Yes.
episodes.
Yep.
Oh, great.
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
she was
Yeah.
yep.
Well, I hope she
Yeah,
can
she
make
was
it
on
up.
episode 3, so you can see
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
you
know
can
she
probably see
was.
that interview on YouTube. Yep.
Oh, I'd like to watch that. Yeah, and I think she's still in Aruba, or she was in Aruba, and that's where it's warm because today it was 39 degrees here this morning. It was 39 degrees to about
Oh, yeah.
11 o'clock. It was like, and we still had visitors. It was raining. It felt like early March.
Oh,
It was
wow.
about, but people still came. And in the afternoon it got better and we had more people, but it was not a busy day. But I was
Yep.
surprised anybody came today. It was so miserable out there. So,
Well, that's fantastic though, man. The place is getting, is getting the traffic, that's great.
yeah, yeah,
That's great to hear.
we liked it.
And like I said, please come down to American Stonehenge. You won't be disappointed. You won't be disappointed at all. And I also like to take the opportunity to thank the listeners out there, and thank you very much for I see some subscriptions coming up, and the viewership has been coming up, and I really appreciate it. And when you see content like this, please like and subscribe, and to keep the show going. This is a true passion of mine. And I'm not getting paid for any of this, or I expect to, but it's a short passion of mine. And of course, speaking with, I'm very blessed to have people like Dennis Stone, to join me on a show like this and tell me about the site of American Stonehenge. And hopefully we'll have another interview concerning your um, experiences, when you were an airline captain.
Oh, thank you.
We
Yeah.
had spoke about that before. It's,
uh, Something to look forward to.
and oh yeah, of course. Dennis, again, thank you very much, for being my special guest here on the Paradigm Matrix.
Thank you, Willie, too, very much. And it's been nice to know you for so many years now. And I am looking forward to your visit and doing maybe a podcast on the site. That would be absolutely wonderful. Thanks again
Oh
for
yeah,
having me
that
on
is
this
the
evening.
plan.
Yeah, we really
Oh, you're
appreciate
very
it
welcome.
from
Thank
all of us.
you. Please tell.
Thanks, Willie.
Thank you. Tell Pat I said hello. Okay.
I will. Thank you, Willie.
All right. Take care now. Take care now. Bye.
Bye bye now.
Welcome to the Paradigm Matrix with your host, Willie Miranda. This has been the Paradigm Matrix hosted by Willie Miranda.